and welcome to Relatively Crafty, a knitting podcast. I'm Cristi. I'm wife of Ron and mother to Tatum and Delaney, my two daughters, and a recent transport from sunny Southern California to the Denver area of Colorado, where winter is a real thing and not something you just see on TV and read in books. I apologize for the poor lighting. Last week my problem was it was too sunny, and so I had to kind of pull back away from the window because the glare was too strong. However, this week we're having the opposite problem. It is trying really hard to snow outside, and so it is really dark and overcast, and so I am right next to the window today in order to try to get every little bit of light that there possibly is. This is a knitting podcast. If you are new, I'm so glad that you came to check me out. If you are a returning viewer, thank you so much for coming back and watching me yet again. There are just a ridiculous amount of knitting podcasts out there, and so I really appreciate that you have chosen to subscribe and to come back and watch me week after week. It means a lot to me. So why don't we go ahead and just roll right into the FOs that I have for this week. If you followed my podcast at all, you probably recognize this lovely orange thing that I have on my body at the moment. This is my Rustique sweater by Glenna C. And yes, I finished it, and it's perfect, guys. I couldn't have knit it any more perfect. The fit is exactly what I wanted. The shawl collar is perfect, the color is perfect, the pattern is exactly perfect, everything is perfect. I'm going to go ahead and post some better shots of the whole sweater so you can see front and back. I'm so in love with this. It is the best fitting sweater that I've ever made. So often the sweaters that I end up putting together are a little bit too short or a little bit too tight, or the yarn isn't quite the right pick for the pattern, or I wish that I had picked a slightly different color. You know, there's always just a slightly wrong thing with them. And so all too often the sweaters end up sitting in my tub where I keep them all, and they don't get worn very often. Sometimes I go back and I repair them, but most of the time they just kind of sit there, and I wear them once in a while, and then they just kind of languish. And it's sad because it's a lot of work that goes into knitting a sweater, and it's a lot of yarn also. So this sweater, however, is, as I said, it's just absolutely perfect. I had mentioned last week that I was afraid that it was going to be a little bit scratchy. However, I've broken my own rule. My rule of that I don't wear an FO until I've shown it on the podcast. I broke that rule for this sweater because I've worn it every single day since I finished it last Wednesday. I couldn't not wear it. It called to me, and it's just so nice and comfy. So since I have worn it every day for the past 6 or 7 days, I haven't had any problem with scratchiness. Now, I've worn it with a long sleeve shirt underneath, and I don't know if it would be an issue if I was wearing a short sleeve shirt. It has been cold enough not to have to worry about that yet, but I do absolutely love it, and I'm so glad that I did it. I'm so glad that this is the sweater that brought me out of my knitting slump. I'm so glad that this is my first sweater FO of 2017. I'm hoping that is an omen that the rest of the year's knitting is going to be just as awesome as this one. So there. Yes, I knitted out of Debbie Bliss Donegal Luxury Tweed Aran in the colorway 360013, which is burnt orange. I used 12.5 skeins, just slightly under 12.5 skeins. They're 50 gram skeins, and I think I used like 22 grams of the 13th skein. So it was 1,200 yards for the entire sweater, and that included, the really deep shawl collar. So I was impressed with the low amount of yardage that I had to use. The yarn is 85% wool, 15% Angora, and as I said, the skeins are 50 grams at 93 yards a piece. And it's this beautiful tweed. It's got all these beautiful flecks of color in it, and it brings out cables just beautifully. I am so pleased. I can't tell you enough how pleased I am with this sweater. But that is not the only FO that I have for you today. I have socks. These were the socks that I was working on last week. If you recall, I knit these out of Blissful Knits in their classic sock weight. My local yarn store, Colorful Knits, carries mini skein sets of hers in the shop, and so this one was called Fire and Ice, and it was 5 20 grams minis, which looked like they kind of gradiated from the blue ice to the orangey red fire. So I took the advice in one of the comments that I got asking how y'all thought that I should knit these up, and I knit a fire sock and an ice sock, and I'm so glad that I did. I really love the way that these worked up. My only complaint is you'll notice there's quite a lot of blue. This part of this sock and this part of this sock are the same skein. I used, this is one skein, and then this, and the heel is a second skein, and then when you get to about here on each sock, that's the third skein, and I split it in half. And you can see that it's got quite a lot of blue in it, but not as much orange as I would have liked. And so the fire sock, you can see it goes from fire to working into ice, but the ice sock just looks like it worked from deep ice to slightly melted ice. So kind of bummed out about that a little bit, but it's so minor, such a minor issue. I'll put that one down. I did try a couple new techniques on these socks. If you recall, I think it was last week, I mentioned that I wanted to test out some new techniques that I felt like I had gotten kind of stagnant because I am a creature of habit. And so I wanted to try out some new things that I hadn't done before and not just go back to the same old stuff that I had done for the past 5 years. So you might notice that I've done a couple of new things on this sock. The first one is I tried the weaving as you go technique that the Cozy Knitter posted on their podcast, which is Dye Another Day, which is the podcast for the Cozy Knitter and the Yarn Enabler. And I'll link that video and their channel down below. But she has a very clever way of weaving in the ends as you go, so you don't have to weave them in afterwards. So since I was changing colors a couple of times in these socks, I went ahead and utilized that technique, and it was a little fiddly. It took me a little while to kind of figure out how best to do it for me. I knit differently than she does, so I kind of had to tweak it a little bit, but I did it, and I'm glad that I learned it, and it's something that I will definitely utilize again when I'm doing something like this, scrappy socks, where I need to change colors often enough to where the ends would be an issue. I also did a fading technique, and I don't know if it's something that I pulled out of my brain or if it's something that I saw somebody else do. I didn't go and look for it. So, but it is entirely possible that I came across it sometime in the past 10 years of knitting, and it's just like stuck in my head. Basically what I did is I would do 1 row with a new color, 3 with the old, 2 with the new, 2 with the old, 3 with the new, and 1 with the old, and then go straight into the new. And because of the speckly way this yarn is dyed, you can't really tell on this sock if you look closely, you can tell a little bit here when I traded into that last color, but I don't think that it's really obvious, and I kind of liked it. I don't know if it would work so well with solids. I mean, there's no real way to make two solid colors fade into each other with just using knitting. I mean, you can obviously dye them to fade into each other, but this worked fine, and I'm pleased with the way it turned out. And then the last technique that I utilized for this sock is I did the fish lips kiss heel, which I'd never done before. And you hear about that one all over YouTube. Everybody uses the fish lips kiss heel. I have to admit that I started out going, really? Do I really need to make a whole diagram of my foot and whatnot? I mean, ugh. But I went ahead and I did it. And I found out that afterwards I probably could have avoided it, because according to the drawing of my foot, I would need to start my heel is exactly the same spot that my Sock It To Me card tells me to. My foot is 9 5/8 inches, so I would start the heel at 7 5/8 inches when I did the diagram, and measured that spot was at 7 5/8 inches. So yeah, I nothing changed with the time that I start my heel, but I can really see the advantage to purchasing that very inexpensive $1 pattern, and reading through it and utilizing all of the knowledge that's in it, because if you're a new knitter, if you're new to socks, it could really make socks a lot easier. There's a lot of really good information in there, and so I do recommend it for somebody who's still fairly new to socks, or somebody who's worried about knitting for family members who aren't local and whatnot. Getting a diagram of their foot and being able to have that with you when you are knitting these socks for these people, I could really see the advantage to that. And I do like that it basically gives you explanations on how to do it top down or toe up. I really am a fan of a versatile heel that can be used both ways. I like the look and the feel of a heel flap and gusset, but you're kind of stuck just doing that on top down socks. I have done a toe-up heel flap and gusset where you do the heel flap on the bottom of the foot, but I hated it. That was years and years and years ago. I knit a pair of Fuego socks, and I did the heel flap on the first sock, and I hated the way it fit, and I hated the way it felt, and so I ended up having to rip the socks back anyway, and so I knit it with a different heel, and I was much more happy with how those turned out. They were shorty socks, so it wasn't like I had to rip out all that much, but yeah, so Fish Lips Kiss Heel, I actually really enjoyed it. As I said last week, I was a huge fan of the wrap and turn or the short row heel, and I would solely use that until I learned how to do the afterthought heel. And at this point, I think that the Fish Lips Kiss heel has replaced the short row heel as my preference. I still will do the afterthought heel for stripes, because as I said, I really like the way it makes the stripes look like they're coming out of the heel. It keeps the continuity of the striping pattern. But for socks like this, where I'm knitting it out of a variegated or a tonal or a solid, or speckly yarn or something like that, where I don't need to have the heel on its own to keep some kind of continuity in the yarn, I'm going to go ahead and probably use the Fish Lips Kiss heel. It was easy, it looks pretty, and it fits well. So yeah, I am a new convert. So yeah, so there's my first pair of socks done. Not first, the only pair of socks that I got finished this week. But I did get a hoe done. I finished the first of my Zach socks. This is so-called the Zac socks because the colorway is Zac. The yarn is the Fireweeds Dye Works by Alaskan Nancy, and it is her 100% merino. I've had this skein for a very long time. It's deep, deep stash. So I don't know if she dyes this color anymore, but I do like it. It's very, very bright. And you might recognize these socks if you saw the tutorial that I posted yesterday. I used these socks to do a tutorial for the Turkish cast-on and for the Afterthought heel. Now I've only posted the Turkish cast-on tutorial, so look for the Afterthought heel coming shortly. I haven't edited that one yet. But I'm very pleased with how these came out. I love these bright colors. I'm just, yeah. It's nice to use up old stash. I've kind of made it a plan this year to try to knit my older yarns. I'm not keeping myself from purchasing new yarn should I come across anything that I have a hankering for and I can afford. But there's a lot of yarn, there's a lot of yarn. I've been swapping for like 7 years in swap groups on Ravelry, and so I've got a lot of yarn from when I first started swapping that I wanted to save for a special project, and I'm tired of this stuff just sitting there languishing in my cedar chest. So I've decided to go ahead and try to knit up the older stash this year, and that's another reason why I'm so proud of this sweater, because this was my oldest stash. I had this yarn since 2009, and yeah, I was so glad to finally use it, and to use it for something so awesome. Sorry, I'll stop bragging about my sweater now, I promise. But anyway, so this was deep stash as well, and I love them, and I can't wait to get the second one done. And then the last thing that I have finished is a whole slew of Hexapuffs. If you recall, I am doing the Winter Camp Cal with the Canadian Knitters Podcast. There's a whole separate group for that. And the idea is a 3-month Cal, and you knit things and you get points, and for every 50 points you earn, you get an entry in for the prizes. I'm not really in it for the prizes, I'm more in it because it's fun to knit with people. And one of the special events that they have, it's all winter themed, one of the special events that they have is the snowball fights, and they're doing one snowball fight every month. So there's going to be 3 total. And it's done over 2 or 3 days, and you have a team, and your team knits as many hexapuffs, hexaflats, mitered squares, blanket squares, little modular blanket stuff, as many as you can in that time period. And so this weekend was our first snowball fight, and so it started at midnight on the 21st and ended at midnight last night. And I knit 21, which may seem like a lot, but there were people that were knitting 50. I was really, really amazed at how many some of these folks got done in the weekend. There's actually 23 here. I knit 2 before, and then knit the rest over the weekend. I did that on purpose because I knew that I was going to knit a lot over the weekend and didn't want to get burned out. I ended up getting a little bit burned out anyway. Yesterday I got about 4 o'clock in the afternoon and I kind of hit a wall, and I was just like, I don't want to make these anymore. So I finished up the mini that I had been working on, and I kind of gave myself permission to take a break from it. But that makes now 310 flats that I have total, which means that it is now time to go ahead and add the however many I have, I think 140 or so, to my existing blanket. So I will take a before picture of it and then show it to you next week, hopefully larger. I showed you last week 2 flats that I liked especially, and I was kind of bummed that I couldn't get them I didn't know what yarn they were, and so I couldn't get a skein of it to make socks out of. I've had a similar problem this week. I have these two, which are gorgeous, and I absolutely love them, and I would love to make a pair of socks out of them. However, even though I know what yarn these were, because they did have a tag, the dyer is no more. The yarn is, the person who dyed these is no longer dyeing yarn, and so there's no way to get any more of it, and I'm kind of bummed out because I would love, oh, I love these. These would be perfect socks. Okay, so that's all that I have finished for this week, so let's go ahead and move into whips. I have cast on my second Zach sock. This is the toe that you saw in that tutorial yesterday, and I'm working my way through. I'm knitting these on ChowGoo US 1 40-inch cable fixed circulars, my favorite sock knitting needle, and I'm really enjoying them. It's a nice, fun, mindless knit. I love knitting socks. Oh, and I forgot to mention that this Fire and Ice pair of socks, this was my 200th pair of socks that I've knit. So I feel kind of good about that. And I love the fact that it was a pair of socks that I tried new things on for my 200th pair. But yeah, keen on that. I obviously don't have 200 socks or 200 pairs of socks. I've knit a lot of socks for other people. But yeah, 200 pairs, yay. And then I have one more sock whip, and I am trying to keep to my trying out new techniques this year, and so I'm trying to knit this sock on a 9-inch circular. I knit the toe magic loop as I normally do, and then moved it to the 9-inch circ after I finished the toe. And I can safely say that so far I hate this with the heat of 1,000 suns. Like, I cannot, I hate it. I hate doing it this way. It's so weird. I feel like a brand new knitter. It's very awkward, and I never realized how much I use my ring finger and pinky finger to kind of stabilize the knitting needles. So when I'm knitting with regular needles, I hold them like this. So I'm kind of hooking this one in with my pinky, and not quite as much on this hand, but still, yeah, I hook and I hold on to them, and so that's how I manage to get the knitting done. I hold them with those, and I push them up against the side of my hand here. And it's very, very comfortable, and I can knit for hours and hours and hours without any problem. However, with these 9-inch circs, there's nothing to hold on to with my pinkies, and that's causing a problem. I know that a lot of people knit them, just using these fingers on each hand, but I'm having a hard time having it feel stable that way. I've noticed that I am kind of using my pinky and ring fingers to kind of hold it under the whole sock, and that helped a little bit. But I knit continental, and I'm finding it really hard to pick. I can't seem to get the right needle into the right spot and get it hooked on there and whatnot, and it's really annoying and hard. Very uncomfortable. Like I said, I feel like a new knitter. Like, this is all new and I don't know what I'm doing. And that's hard after a decade of knitting, to just all of a sudden feel like I can't do it. So I tried a couple of things. I tried knitting backwards. So instead of knitting this way, with the right side facing me, I turned it around so that I was knitting backwards with the wrong side, the inside of the sock facing me, which is a trick that I've done for knitting things flat. I don't purl as tightly as I knit, and so when I would knit things flat, it was especially an issue when I would knit like a top-down raglan that had a V-neck, and you have to knit the beginning until you join the fronts. flat back and forth, and then you join in the round and knit the rest of the round, and the top of the sweater always looked very loose and messy, and then the bottom looked very uniform and neat. And so so I taught myself how to knit backwards, so I don't purl anymore. I just, I go from the left needle to the right needle, and then instead of turning it, I go from the right needle to the left needle. And so I tried that, but that didn't help either. It was definitely an issue with holding the yarn in my left hand. And so another thing that I taught myself how to do is to knit English, or to throw. And I do that with my color work. I hold my main color in my left hand and my contrasting color in my right hand. And so I tried that, and I did find that does make it a lot easier and a lot more comfortable to knit on these 9-inch circulars. However, I don't really enjoy knitting this way. If I did, I would knit this way all the time. So I don't know. I told myself that I needed to get to commit to a full sock. I bought the needles. I should get my money's worth out of the needles by knitting a full sock. But I'm noticing that my knitting is a lot looser on the parts that I've been doing with the 9-inch circ, and it's tighter on the toe stitches, and so I'm afraid that the whole sock's going to be too loose or sloppy. And I don't want to miss out on having, this sock in this great colorway, because I love this colorway. So I don't know yet what I'm going to do. If there's anybody out there that knits on 9-inch circs and has any tips on what they do or how they got into it, I think at this point it's safe to say that I'm not going to be a 9-inch circ sock knitter. Like, that's just not going to be the person that I am. I like magic loop. I'm comfortable with magic loop. I realize that I lose some time in having to, do the magic loop and switch the needles out, but I still knit socks pretty fast, so I'm not too upset about it. So yeah, I am looking for any kind of tips or advice that you have out there if you experience this, if you have experience with this, and yeah, I'm definitely not ready to give up on it yet. I'll definitely do at least another couple of inches and see how it works out, but yeah, not enjoying this. I am, however, really enjoying this yarn. This is Magic and Moonshine. She's a very small indie dyer, and another one of those personal friends that I have on Ravelry. I've known her for years in the swap groups. She even dyed a colorway, especially for me. It was called A Hole in Cristi's Head, and it was all rainbow and bright colors, because I like bright colors. So anyway, this is another deep stash. This is one of my oldest sock yarns, and I'm really glad to finally be knitting it up. I absolutely love it. It's shorter stripes than I normally knit. The stripes are turning out to be just about 3 rows, but I'm loving the way that's striping up, and these colors are just perfect. And then my last whip is my Twillingate, which was designed by Laura Ayler. Laura Ayler is one of the featured designers for the winter camp for the Canadian Knitter Podcast, and so you get extra points if you knit one of her designs, and there just happened to be one that I was excited to knit. I'll post the picture here of what it's supposed to look like. And if you recall, I was going to originally knit this out of Classic Elite Solstice, which is a 70-30 cotton merino blend, 70% cotton, 30% merino, which I had gotten when I was living in California and needed the cooler the cooler yarn for the cotton, but here I don't need that, and I don't really like knitting with cotton. I don't like, yeah, I just don't like knitting with cotton. So I kept looking at it. I wound up 5 of the skeins. I was ready to go, and I kept noticing that I was putting off starting that sweater, and knitting different things. And I realized that it was because I really just didn't want to knit with the yarn. I don't have any complaints about it. I've never knit with it before, so I can't say anything bad about it. I just know that it just wasn't calling to me. And so I've decided to go ahead and destash both the sweater quantities I had of this yarn. I don't want to knit with it, so so I'm going to pass it on to somebody who will knit with it. So anyway, then I had to then find different yarn to knit these sweaters. And as I said several times already, I'm really trying to knit older stash. And so I had some old skeins from ages ago that were of universal yarn deluxe worsted. I had the Nitrox blue and Glacier gray, which is kind of a brown leaning gray. And the Nitrox blue is just a beautiful blue. It's blue. And I had more of the Glacier gray. I knit Ron a vest out of it a couple of years ago, and it knit up very nicely. The yarn was very pleasant to work with. It is not superwash, I don't believe, so we've had to be careful when we clean his vest, but it knit up very nicely. And every time that he wears it, I'm like, oh man, you know what, it's got good stitch definition. That's a pretty yarn. It knit up really nicely. And it was pleasant to knit with. And so I had 4 of these, and then 1 full skein of the gray, and then this leftover. And I was like, it's been sitting there for years. Why have I not knit with it? This isn't even yarn that I was keeping for a special project. It was just yarn that I just never seemed to pick up to knit. And so I decided that I'm going to go ahead and try to knit the Twillingate out of that. Now obviously the picture I showed you, the Twillingate is a single color. I have 2 colors. I'm going to do the main body in the blue. I have almost 900 yards of this, and then I'm going to do accents with the gray. The collar and the bottom of the button, or the bottom ribbing band thing. I can't think of what it's called right now, and on the sleeves. The Twillingate doesn't use as much yarn as a regular sweater because it is a short sleeve sweater, so I think that I will get away with it, doing it all in the blue with just the ribbing done in the gray. However, if I do find that I'm getting close to the end of the blue, I might do the front pocket, the kangaroo pocket, in the gray as well, or I may choose to just bypass it completely. Although I'm really hoping not to bypass it completely because I like the look of it and I like to be able to stick my hands in pockets. So anyway, once I made that change, I found that I was very excited to cast on the sweater. And here's what I got so far. Can't you tell? It looks just like a sweater. This has got a very interesting construction. It's top down, but it's not a raglan. And I've never knit a sweater like this before. But I kind of dig it. I mean, I always like learning new things, and so it's a new adventure, and I like that. It says on the pattern page that it is adapted from Barbara Walker's top-down seamless, simultaneous set-in sleeve construction from her book Knitting from the Top. So I've never knit any of her sweaters either, and so yeah, I'm new to this experience. I like it. I will say that the way that the increases are kind of fiddly, I have to really pay attention because for the front you're increasing once every 3 rows, and then the sleeves it's every 2 rows, and it's just none of it's like equal. You have to kind of keep track of 3 different increase amounts and times. And with the top-down raglan, you're basically increasing every right side row at all the points. And this one you're not. But I do like the set-in sleeves. I don't know if you can see that. It looks, I just think it's going to look really good. And you, I don't want to give away too much of the construction because it is a paid pattern, but you end up with a seam here, and I think that, and it's right at the top of the shoulder, so I think it's going to give some added strength to the sweater itself. A lot of people complain that raglans end up pulling because there's no seams, but you have a seam there, and so I think that's gonna help. I'm very intrigued with it, and I'm looking forward to continuing it on. I would have been a lot farther had we not had the snowball fight, because the weekends are big knitting times for me. I watch a lot of TV. Well, I watch it on my computer. I watch a lot of Netflix, and I knit for hours. Once Friday after the kids go to bed type time, I make sure that all my homework is done, and I just knit until it's time to go to bed. And I do the same thing on Saturday. So I have big blocks of time on Friday and Saturday night to knit, and so I would have been further, except for I was spending that time knitting hexaflats. So anyway, expect to see a lot of growth on that by next week. I'm excited about it. And that is all that I am currently working on. So I do have just one stash edition this week. I don't buy a lot of yarn from big retailers online, not because I'm against it, because I'm happy to get my yarn from wherever I can get my yarn from. However, I don't often have a lot of money for yarn, and so I don't buy a lot of yarn. I just generally, as a rule, don't buy a lot of yarn. I get a skein here and again, and try to earn other yarn with knitting services, and then I try to swap yarn a lot, and that's how I get most of my yarn. But one of the larger retailers that I do like is Eat, Sleep, Knit. And I love the fact that they have yardage tracking, and you get rewards for what you buy. I like loyalty programs, and so I get their newsletter email whenever it comes. And I happen to notice that that their rewards program this year is Candyland themed, and so it's all very candy-esque. And they mentioned in their newsletter that Madeline Tosh was knitting them 12 exclusive colorways throughout the year that were candy themed, and the first colorway was Willy Wonka, and I am a huge fan of Willy Wonka. I grew up on the movie with Gene Wilder. It was one of my favorites, and even though there were parts of it that creeped me out, and I've read the book with my kids, and we've even enjoyed the Johnny Depp movie. But I really just like the story. I love magical stories like that for kids, and so I saw that they were going to have a Willy Wonka exclusive colorway, so I followed the link to get a look at it, and they have it on several different bases, and it looks so different on each base. And I was like, oh, those are really pretty, but I really shouldn't buy any yarn. And then I was looking to see how the rewards program went, and so I clicked on my account, and I discovered that I had money in my account, like I had store credit, and I was like, well, okay, that I'm going to take as a sign that I should get this yarn. So I went ahead and got a skein of the Willy Wonka purple in the Madeline Tosh Twist Light sock yarn. Hopefully you can see that. I haven't used Twist Light before. I have used Tosh sock, but I don't have any experience with Twist Light. However, I think that this skein is gorgeous. I don't know if the purples are really picking up very well in the camera, but it's just a really pretty kind of a purpley browny variegated base with just all these pretty colored speckles, and I'm really excited about it. I have definitely started to transition from stripes to kind of speckled yarn. Now, don't get me wrong, I still really like stripy sock yarn, but up until last fall, I only owned stripy sock yarn. Like, I didn't have a single solid, I didn't have a single variegated, I didn't have a single speckled. I just had stripy sock yarn, and all I was ever interested in was knitting stripy sock yarn. However, I now have 3 skeins that aren't stripes, that have speckles in them, and I'm excited to knit them up and use them. I'm not sure what I'm going to do. I don't know if I'm going to continue knitting vanilla socks with these. I don't know if I'm going to try to knit shawls with these or something else. I like the way it looks with vanilla socks and speckles, but I don't know if they're going to be boring. I mean, part of the reason why I like knitting vanilla socks in stripes is because the stripes keep it very interesting. So we'll see. Vanilla socks are still my favorite to wear. I'm not a big fan of wearing heavily patterned socks, and I definitely don't like wearing lace socks. However, I do have a couple of pairs that have cables on them, like the Cookie A single stitch cable designs, and I like those well enough. They're comfortable to wear. So I don't know, we'll see. But I'm definitely excited about having them. They are pretty, and I like looking at them. So that is the only addition that I have for this week. And I love the fact that I didn't even pay full price for it because I had store credit. I don't even know where the store credit came from, but it was there, and so I was able to take advantage of it and use it, which is always really nice. It's like when you wear a coat that you haven't worn for a long time, and you put your hands in your pockets and you find a $10 bill and you're like, whoa, free money. I mean, it was money that you had before, but now but you'd forgotten about it. I love that. So yeah. So anyway, guys, that's it. That's what I've got for this week. Oh no. Okay. Yes. You see what my brain was like. I'm forgetting something. What was I was going to say something. What am I forgetting? And I should have put this at the beginning. Still kind of sucking at this whole podcast thing. I am Cristi-Lael on Ravelry. I am also Cristi-Lael without the dash on Instagram. I will link those both down below, so you are welcome to find me and follow me there. Check out the patterns. I try to keep really good detailed notes on my projects. I'm very anal about keeping up with my Ravelry stuff. So when I'm knitting something, I do probably too much updates on my Ravelry pages, with the exception of my vanilla socks. I don't really post much about those because they're all the same. But I also, and forgive me if this is presumptuous of me, but I started a Ravelry group for the Relatively Crafty Podcast. I don't know if anybody's interested in having a Ravelry group. I know that most of the bigger podcasts have Ravelry groups, and I like knit-alongs and whatnot, and their giveaways and such and so forth. And so I just thought it might be a good idea to have one, and then hopefully we can have a knit-along maybe in the next month or two, and I would like to do prizes, and I would like to have giveaways, and it seems like that's the best way to do it. So yeah, I've started one there. I will link it down below, but you can also find it by just searching Relatively Crafty in the groups tab on Ravelry. And yeah, I'm the only one in there. I started it yesterday, and it's very lonely. So please come and join me, and we can talk. I spend a lot of time on Ravelry. Whenever my computer's on, I have a Ravelry tab open. I go and check in there regularly. So it would be really nice to have other people to talk about. I will also try to do. I just followed the other podcast Ravelry groups that I've seen, and so there's an introduce yourself thread, and there's a ask me questions thread, and there's a chattering thread, because I believe I'm a firm believer in chattering on Ravelry, and then I will probably do a thread for each episode if there's any specific comments that anybody wants to make about the episode, any kind of conversations that you want to have. And yeah, I'm looking to do some cals and some giveaways and that kind of thing. I'm trying to come up with a really good cal idea. I feel like since it's the first one, it should be something awesome. And so I'll come up with an idea, and I'm like, no, that's not awesome enough. I need something more awesome. And I haven't quite got the appropriate level of awesomeness yet. So I'm working on it. If you have any ideas, I'm always open for ideas. I love feedback from you guys. So please let me know if there's something you're like, you know what, I really want to knit this designer in February, or I really want to knit this type of project in February or March, or I really think that it would be great when springtime comes to knit in these colors. Dude, lay that on me right now, because I could totally get behind getting some feedback from you guys, and yeah, let's make this a whole group effort. Let's do it. Let's do it to it. So yes, that is now the end of the podcast. I think I am done. I think I'm done talking. So anyway, guys, I hope that you have a wonderful rest of your week. Enjoy your Tuesday. I'm going to knit night tonight. It's my favorite place to be on a Tuesday night. I get to show off my sweater in real life, which I always like. I had bound off last week, but it didn't have any buttons, and so they saw it on, but there were still ends weaving, hanging out, and there were no buttons, and now it's completely done. So I'm looking forward to showing that off, and to just hang out with grown-ups, because I spend a lot of time here alone in my house, or with my kids, and I love my kids and I love my house, but I like hanging out with grown-ups too. So yeah, that's all I got. I'm going to say goodbye now. Talk to you guys later. Bye-bye.